The night I learned what she really thought and how I saved my son. Before we get into it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe that wisdom, patience, and truth are real power, please like the video and subscribe. It helps more people hear stories where doing the right thing still matters. This story begins with a quiet insult delivered right at my dinner table. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It came in French, delivered with a smile, while she reached for the salt. She called me an ugly old cow, dismissed me as a clueless American, and bragged, still in French, that she would marry my son for a green card, then divorce him and take his inheritance. She thought no one in the room could understand. She didn't know she was speaking the native language of my late wife. She didn't know I speak it too. In trying to insult me, she armed me. I smiled. I passed the bread, and I began to plan. A Tuesday call in Boston. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in Boston, the kind of gray day that makes the sky look like old pewter. I was in my study, the room where I keep the books I've carried through every chapter of my life. First as a young teacher, then a tenured professor, and finally a retired historian who still believes the past has a way of telling the truth when people don't. My tablet rang. My son, Leo, appeared on the screen. He's 35 and usually calm. But that day, his face was bright with a happiness that could cut through any cloud. "Dad," he said, "are you sitting down?" "I am," I told him. "What's going on?" He took a breath, grinned like the kid he used to be, and said, I asked Juliette to marry me. She said yes. Juliette Dubois. The French woman he'd met on a work trip to Paris 6 months earlier. Their time together in person had been short, small trips, a few weeks scattered here and there. But there had been a lot of calls, a lot of messages, and a lot of big feelings speeding along faster than careful choices usually can. I wanted to feel a burst of uncomplicated joy for him. I did feel happiness, but something else settled in alongside it. A careful kind of caution. 6 months is enough time for the seasons to change. It isn't always enough time to see a person clearly. "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. "When can I meet her?" "They want to come out next month," he said. "Juliette and her parents. They want to meet you properly." "Properly," I repeated. I said yes and kept my face warm. Inside, I marked the word. I told myself to watch, to listen, to take notes with my eyes like I always did as a historian. The past has patterns. So do people. My late wife, Colette, was French. She taught me the language, the humor, the timing, and the way people there say more with a glance than a whole paragraph can say. More than that, she had a gift for people. She could see who someone was before they finished their first story. I wished she were here. She would have known. I would have to learn. The first video call. A week later, Leo set up a joint video call. 4 squares. My son, glowing with joy. Me, trying to stay open and steady. And the Dubois family, Juliette, plus her parents, Jean-Luc and Isabelle. Juliette was beautiful and polished. Her English had that smooth French accent that softens the edges of words. She praised Leo without a single slip. Then she turned to me and spoke about respect for learning and how rare it is to meet people who care about ideas. Her parents were just as smooth, well-dressed, well-spoken, and practiced at giving a refined impression without actually revealing anything specific. They told a gentle story about a family line in Lyon, vineyards, a house that had been in the family for generations, and a recent run of misfortune. They said business reversals. They said the modern economy. It was the kind of story that asks for sympathy without asking any follow-up questions. A story that says, we are still what we once were, just temporarily out of step. I listened. I watched. I nodded and kept the conversation pleasant. But 2 tiny moments didn't fit. The first came when Leo mentioned a new round of funding for his company and gave the figure. It was a proud fact, delivered simply. As he said it, Juliette looked at her mother. It was quick, less than a heartbeat, but it happened. Isabel's mouth tightened in a small, controlled smile. Not joy for Leo, confirmation for themselves. Then the warm expressions slipped back into place. The second was a small historical error. Jean-Luc mentioned an ancestor honored with a title by Napoleon III, and then paired that with the wrong duchy, one that didn't exist in that way during that period. To most people, that's not a mistake you would notice. To a historian, it says, this story may be rehearsed more than it is real. Later, Leo called me back, eager, hopeful. So, what do you think? They're very polished, I said, choosing each word as if it might matter later. He heard the hesitation. Dad, please, don't start. I'm not starting anything, I said. I'm just getting to know them. It's fast, that's all. It feels right, he said. When you know, you know. I let it go. People in love believe what love needs them to believe. Facts alone can't cut through that. Timing matters more. Dinner where my wife and I celebrated our life. Soon after, Leo let me know they were arriving the second week of November. He said he was booking their flights first class and getting them a suite at the Four Seasons. We need to make a good impression, he said. You already did, I told him. You paid for everything. He didn't laugh. He said this is how things are done. I let that go too. What I didn't let go was my next idea. Dinner at Le Coeur. It's a small French restaurant in the city that holds nearly every happy memory from my life with Colette. Anniversaries. Milestones. Ordinary nights that turned into cherished ones. If I wanted to see who Juliette really was, I would bring her to a place that asked people to be their real selves. We sat in a quiet corner, me, Leo, and the Dubois family. The rooms in Le Coeur hold their sound like a secret. The service doesn't interrupt. The food is careful and honest. It's a place that rewards attention. We went through the first courses. Everything stayed in English. The conversation was warm and pleasant. Juliette spoke about love and family and the life she wanted to build in America. And she looked at me the way a thoughtful future daughter-in-law might look, a respectful, hopeful gaze. If you didn't know how to look past a performance, you would feel safe. Then the moment came. Leo turned toward Jean-Luc to tell a story about a harmless college prank. Juliette leaned toward her mother and changed languages. She believed I wouldn't understand. She did not know that for decades, the words she used, French words, were the words my wife and I spoke every day in our home. Juliette called me an ugly old cow. She said I was boring. She said Leo was rich and naive and the plan was simple. Marry for the green card, then divorce and take half. Her father asked in French what the plan was. She answered without hesitation, repeating it in blunt terms. They spoke about debt the way someone might refer to a scuffed shoe, annoying, but nothing to worry about once the money was in hand. I kept eating. I kept a neutral face. I watched the small things, the easy way she answered her father. The way her mother nodded once when she said the part about taking half. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't heat of the moment spite. It was a plan. When the evening ended, I shook hands with Jean-Luc, then greeted the women in perfect French. I closed with one line. I loved meeting you. I bet immigration will too. You can tell when a mask breaks. It isn't loud. It's a change in the eyes. Panic first, then calculation, then the smallest glance toward the exit. No one said a word. We left. The first hard decision. My phone rang after I got home. It was Leo. Dad, what did you say in French? They got weird. If I told him the truth right there, he would go to her. She would cry the right tears and say the right words. He would think I was jealous or bitter or stuck in the past. He would choose her side. That's what love does when it's new and loud and sure of itself. So I used a simple lie to buy time. I said it was a dry, provincial joke about tax authorities, some lion humor that didn't land. He relaxed. He wanted to relax. He wanted everything to stay as perfect as he needed it to be. That gave me the space to do what needed doing. Gather proof so clear it couldn't be brushed aside. The trip to New York. At 7 a.m. the next morning, I boarded the Acela Express from Boston to New York. I went to see David Chen. He's an old friend and now one of the most respected immigration lawyers in the country. His office is on the 50th floor of a glass and steel building in Midtown, with windows that frame the city like a set of hard-earned trophies. I told him everything. The video call, the too perfect family story, the small look when the company's valuation came up, and the dinner conversation in French. I kept my voice even, like I was presenting a lecture. Because sometimes staying calm is the only way to hold onto the line that ties you to your purpose. David didn't dramatize it. He didn't pretend to be shocked. He gave the problem its name, marriage fraud, and then set the condition that matters in court. Intent before marriage. Your word is strong, he said, but it's still your word. She will say you misheard or misunderstood. She will play innocent. He will want to believe her. We need paper. We need messages. We need what judges call clear and convincing. Until then, you have the hardest part. What's that? I asked. You go home and play your role. Supportive father. No more surprises. No more French. No stumbles. You smile. You listen. You keep close. I'll run the investigation. I nodded. It felt like agreeing to swallow cold sand for breakfast. But it was right. The first report. Numbers don't lie. 2 weeks later, the first report arrived in an encrypted file. Dubois Family Financials. Preliminary report. The summary was simple. The story of an old family with temporary trouble was a costume. The truth was debt, systemic and deep. The report showed lines of credit pushed to their limits, business loans in arrears, and a household budget bleeding out with no plan to stop it. It documented a gambling problem for Jean-Luc and a failed boutique for Isabel. It listed the house in Lion mortgage to the edge, with the kind of language that means foreclosure unless something changes fast. I didn't feel pity. I'm not proud of that. But when someone plans to burn your son's life to warm their hands, sympathy needs to take a number and wait. The second report. A pattern. 10 days later came the second report. A smaller file with a single name on the subject line. Alistair Finch, a British banker. 2 years earlier, he had been engaged to Juliet. It was the same pattern. Whirlwind romance, quick engagement, plans to relocate to London. It ended the moment his lawyers insisted on a strong prenuptial agreement, one that protected the assets he had before the marriage. When her side tried to fight even baseline protections, he hired an investigator. The engagement ended weeks before the wedding. Patterns matter. Judges care. So do sane people. Playing my part while the truth took shape. Meanwhile, I kept showing up as the father who was trying. I went with them to see a wedding venue on the North Shore. The place was beautiful. Old stone. Slow light. Expensive enough to make the average person step back and think. Juliet didn't step back. She glided through the grounds like they were already hers, pointing to corners where flowers would go, and places where a quartet might play. This is history, she told Leo and then turned to me. You understand, Elias. I do, I said. I didn't add the rest of the sentence in my head. History is also facts. During a polite stop for coffee later that week, I raised the idea of a prenuptial agreement as gently as I knew how. Leo bristled immediately, but Juliet didn't get angry. She looked hurt in a very controlled way. She said love isn't a spreadsheet. She said if you need to write a contract against the person you want to marry, then the marriage is already wrong. She said she wanted to build a life, not audit one. She said it quietly, with care, with that steady look people use when they want the room to agree without feeling like they were pushed. Leo softened. My attempt failed. I stayed quiet. You don't fight a skilled performance by arguing in the middle of it. You wait for the lights to come up and let the audience see the stagehands. The smoking gun. On a Friday night late, the message from David arrived. The smoking gun. It was a set of messages, real, obtained lawfully, translated carefully. They were in French. They were casual and arrogant. The fish is on the hook. The American is completely smitten. His father is a boring old professor. I pretend to care about his dead wife. The ATM is fully funded. We are going to be so rich. That last line came right after Leo told her the new valuation of his company. You can measure the temperature of a person's soul by what they say when they think the room can't understand them. This was ice cold. I closed my laptop and sat without moving. I didn't feel triumph. I felt confirmation. And the heavy responsibility that comes when you know you have to end something your child thinks will save his life. The engagement party. I called Leo and told him I'd been thinking, and that I wanted to get this right. I said I wanted to host an engagement party at my club, the Avalon. He was relieved. He passed the phone to Juliet, who cooed her thanks. I could hear in her voice the math she was doing. The Avalon is an old Boston room, the kind of place where people shake hands and trust that the handshake still means something. To be celebrated there is to be accepted. I planned it carefully. The music would be warm, the lighting gentle, the food classic. The whole night would feel like a gold blanket. When something hard lands, it's better if people feel safe. I invited my oldest friends, the ones who stood by me when Colette died, who watched Leo grow up, who would read the room honestly and remember who we are, not who we looked like under chandelier light. I asked Leo for a list of his key investors and partners. He wrote it fast, excited. I added one last name to the list. David Chen. The night the lights came on, the Avalon felt like it always does, solid and calm. The trio in the corner played something slow. Glasses moved through the room like small stars. Leo looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. Juliet wore emerald green and handled the crowd like a pro, warm handshakes, well-timed smiles, just enough curiosity to make each person feel special. I tapped my glass and stood. I spoke first in English. I said what a father can say with a clear conscience, that my son looked happy, that happiness matters, and that the woman beside him had brought something bright into his life. I raised a toast. The room echoed it back. People smiled. People believed. Then I asked for a small indulgence. A few words in French to honor Juliet's heritage. I began with something soft and harmless, then shifted to a simple fable about a songbird and a trusting eagle. As I spoke, a screen descended quietly behind me and displayed the English translation of my French in real time. I told the fable without anger. I described how the songbird's mistake wasn't the scheme itself. It was failing to notice that the old owl in the forest understood every note of her song. I ended. The room was silent. Then David stood and introduced himself as an immigration attorney. He explained that at my request, he and his firm had conducted a thorough review of the Du Bois family's situation and submitted the results to the proper authorities. The screen changed to slides. The first showed finances, clean charts, red numbers. It documented more than 700,000 euros of debt. The next slide showed a photo of Alistair Finch and explained the prior engagement, the pattern, and the ending. Finally, the screen showed messages in French with English translations in bold beside them. The fish is on the hook. His father is a boring old professor. The ATM is fully funded. David detailed that reports had been filed with United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and the FBI. He said a civil lawsuit would be filed the next morning to recover every expense and the full market value of the 6-carat engagement ring. He said it calmly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He looked sure. Security didn't drag the Du Bois family out. The Avalon doesn't do scenes. A gentleman in a dark suit, the club's director of security, came to their table, spoke softly, and walked them to a side door. Isabel cried. Jean-Luc looked emptied out. Juliet kept her eyes anywhere but on my son. Holding my son up. I found Leo standing where he had stood as the screen changed and changed again. He looked like someone who had watched a floor vanish under his feet. He didn't speak. He turned, saw me, and then he folded into my arms and cried like the pain had been waiting for permission. I held him. I told him what fathers say when they mean it more than anything. There is nothing to forgive. You have a good heart. There was no victory in that room. There was truth and cost. That's what real protection looks like most of the time: expensive, quiet, and necessary. Aftermath. 3 months passed. The weather shifted. The story moved from loud rooms to paperwork. The Du Bois family was deported a week after the party. Their visas were revoked. In Lyon, they were met by authorities interested in the list of creditors David's team had found. It wasn't our problem anymore. That's not cruel. It's boundaries. Leo changed in ways that matter. He didn't become bitter. He became clearer. He didn't stop loving people. He started loving people with his eyes open. When you have seen the shape of a lie up close, real things become easier to recognize. He threw himself into work, but not to hide, just to heal. In early December, he and I flew to France. We rented a small car and drove through the Loire Valley, the vines bare against a winter sky. We didn't talk much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the silence said everything we needed to hear. We went to the village where Colette was born and where she asked to be buried. We stood by her grave. Leo placed white roses on the stone and stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at her name like the letters were a face. She would have known right away, wouldn't she? He said. Yes, I told him. She would have. He put his arm around my shoulder. We stood there a long time. The air was cold and honest. Hash hash what I learned again. People think listening is hearing sentences. That's part of it. Real listening is also watching the pauses, the quick glance, the tiny slip in a story, and the words people use when they think there is no cost to telling the truth. You learn more from what people say to the person they think can't understand than from any speech they make to the person they want to impress. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot and careless. This was a cold kind of care that hurts in the doing. You don't protect someone from a lie by screaming louder. You protect them by building a case the lie can't survive. I'm grateful every day that Colette taught me French. A language is more than words. It's a key to a room people keep locked. Juliette didn't realize I had the key. She told me who she was. She did it in the plainest way possible. She talked about us as if we were objects and numbers. And she did it in a voice she believed was safe from understanding. You cannot build a marriage on a plan to take. You cannot build a life on a story that changes every time it needs to. You can pretend for a while. You can dress it up. But when the simple weight of reality lands, it stays. Hash hash the party's true purpose. People sometimes ask me why I did it publicly. Why not tell Leo quietly in the kitchen and handle it in private? Because I didn't just need to show my son the truth. I needed to make sure the truth could stand in the open where doubt would try to erode it later. If I had told him alone, the story would have turned into a fight behind closed doors. He said, she said, and then a long season of second guessing and what if? And maybe I misunderstood. A public lie needs a public end, especially when money, immigration, and a company are involved. I chose a room where people remember things, where witnesses could say later, no, we saw it. We read it. It was real. I didn't destroy a family that night. I stopped strangers from turning us into collateral for their debt. I didn't break Leo's heart. I held his heart still while the truth cut the ties he didn't know were there. Hash hash what changed for Leo. After the dust settled, Leo made a few quiet choices that told me he was going to be okay. He added a layer of protection to his company. He hired a general counsel with the authority to say no, even to him. He set personal policies about large expenses and gifts. He created space between his private life and his business. He called a few friends and apologized for being out of touch. And then he took those friends to dinner and asked them real questions about their lives. He came over more often, not because he needed to report to me, but because the house felt like a safe room again. He and I didn't replay the whole story endlessly. We didn't reread the messages together late at night. We didn't stew. We built. We cooked simple meals. We fixed a door that had stuck for years. We replaced a lamp. He came with me to the small used bookstore I go to twice a month, and he bought a stack of paperbacks he said he had been too busy to read for too long. None of that is dramatic. All of it is how people heal. Hash hash a quiet visit to Colette. When we stood in that French cemetery in December, I thought about the day I met Colette. She laughed at one of my awkward sentences in French and then taught me how to say it the right way without making me feel like I was being graded. Later, when we built a life, she would correct my accent with a kiss and say, "Good enough for home." She gave me that language. Decades later, it let me hear the truth. I don't believe in signs the way some people do, but I do believe in cause and effect. You invest in learning a person, their language, their ways, their humor, and one day that investment might give you exactly what you need to protect the person you both love most, your child. Leo asked me, before we left the village, if I thought he would ever trust love again. I told him the truth. Not quickly. But not quickly isn't the same as never. In time, he'll trust better. That's different and better than trusting more. Hash hash what I would tell any parent. One, stay close without grabbing the wheel. If I had pushed hard at the beginning, I would have been written off as jealous or controlling. Staying close gave me access to the facts. Two, use proof, not pressure. Love doesn't respond to lectures. It responds to evidence that's impossible to ignore. 3. Keep the bridge intact. I lied once about the tax joke to keep my son from shutting me out completely. I don't like lying. I did it to hold the connection until I had what I needed to tell the truth in a way that could be heard. 4. Choose the right room for the reveal. I picked a place where the truth could stand up without being spun the next day. 5. Hold them when it lands. No advice helps in the first shock. Arms help. Time helps. Food helps. Sleep helps. What I would tell anyone in love. 1. Fast is fun. Careful is kind. Falling hard feels great. Checking facts is not cynicism. It's care for your future self. 2. If someone resists reasonable protections, ask why. A prenup that protects what you built before the marriage is not an insult. If it triggers rage or tears designed to shut down the conversation, that's information. 3. Watch for rehearsed stories. If every answer is perfect, the truth usually isn't in the room. 4. Listen to what's said when you're not the audience. People tell their real selves to the person they think doesn't matter. The last word on truth. We think truth explodes. Most of the time, it lands like a heavy stone on a weak bridge. It doesn't shatter. It sags, and then the parts that can't hold start to give way. That's what happened here. A plan built on a lie looked impressive for a while, a perfect dress, a green gemstone, a practiced smile. But it wasn't made to carry the simple weight of facts. That's all I did. Carry the facts into the room and let them sit there. Thank you. And your turn. Thank you for listening. If there's a lesson here, it's that listening well is sometimes the quietest and bravest thing you can do for the people you love. You don't need to be loud. You need to be steady. You need to be patient. And when the time comes, you need to be exact. What was the most powerful lesson you took from this story? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more true stories where patience and truth prevail, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm glad you're here.